Hey everyone, it's Michael GoosebumpsFan. It's kind of late at night, that's probably why I seem kind of tired and kind of draggy throughout this video, so if you wonder what's wrong, that's probably what it is. If I seem over hyper, that's probably what it is. But anyway, today I'm going to be talking about the book that I talked about earlier, yesterday, whatever, in my video for my update of the recent book haul and stuff that I had for the week. I talked about how I was so in love with the Goosebumps book I'm reading right now, and this is a great example of one. This is part of the Tales to Give You Goosebumps books. It is the fourth in that 6-book series. It's Still More Tales to Give You Goosebumps by R.L. Stine. Of course, that is Curly right there in a pirate costume, dressed up for Halloween. Yes, this is a Halloween-themed book. Pretty much every story, except for one of them, actually takes place either around Halloween or on Halloween. And I loved the book. I thought it was really, really good. And it was a shame to go from something like Weirdo Halloween that I thought was okay and fine for the most part, to something so drastically great like this that came out way back in the day, around the time the original Goosebumps series was going on, the original classic series that everybody knows from the 90s. This is really good. I could not recommend the Tales to Give You Goosebumps series enough. They're all short story collections, basically. About 10 stories a book. And they're usually about 15 pages each for anybody who's not familiar. I have read and reviewed the first 3 books here on the channel so far. I don't know when I'll get around to the next book, but I know the final book, the 6th book of the series, is a Christmas story collection, which I'm super stoked for. I hope and pray I get to last until December of this year so I can read that and do reviews for it here on the channel, God willing. But yeah, Still More Tales to Give You Goosebumps. Really, really good read. I can't wait to talk about some of these stories, man. Tell you the general idea for them. Of course, I'm spoiler-free here on my channel in case anybody happens to not know that, or if you happen to be new to the channel for whatever reason. The first story in here is Pumpkin Juice, and that was a really cool one. 2 kids find a book essentially like on Halloween night or Halloween day, something like that, and they make like a recipe for this pumpkin juice stuff, right? And it's delicious apparently, but as they go out trick-or-treating they start realizing how bad of an appetite they have, and they start craving things that aren't just candy. I mean, just horrifying things like raw meat, for example. And the story is so wacky and wild, and the solution at the end of the story is really crazy too. I just had a fantastic time reading it. It's one of the best opening short stories I've ever read in a short story collection, much less whether it be a Goosebumps collection or anything. I'll also say right now, even more Tales to Give You Goosebumps very well could be my favorite of the Tales to Give You Goosebumps books as of yet. I'm assuming it'll probably be the Christmas book because I love Christmas time. It's my favorite time of the year, especially as being a Christian. I love that time of the year. But this was such a good book. This was such a great, great Goosebumps book. It wasn't like all the stories were 110% amazing, but they were pretty great across the board. I would say pretty much all the stories were great. But anyway, the next story is Attack of the Tattoo. I loved this one. Basically, a kid goes out trick-or-treating at nighttime, and she finds a small tattoo of a snake. And it's in the bottom of her bag. She doesn't remember how she got it or who gave it to her, but it just happens to be at the very bottom, stuck to the bag. And she applies it by putting water that is scorched by the sun, if you will. And she puts that tattoo on her arm, puts the water on it like back in the day. I don't know if a lot of kids nowadays, especially you folks that are younger that are watching this video right now, that watch my channel regularly and stuff, I don't know how many of you would actually know about this or if they even do this still, but in the 90s and in the early 2000s that I grew up in, since I was born in 1994, we did a lot of things like you would get a Dragon Ball Z coloring book or an activity book, right? And it would have tattoos in it, and they would be like the little beautiful colored art pictures, and you just put them on your arm and put a wet wash rag over it and it would stick to your arm. How many people that are watching this video have forgotten that that even existed? I forgot all about it until I saw this. I don't see that mentioned in 90s style movies anymore. I don't hear any of my friends talk about the stuff that are my age. I forgot all about it, and it just shows me how much the vein, or well, how much the spirit and the blood of the 90s is in the veins of Goosebumps. You know, it was just a really cool thing to read. I was so shocked because I hadn't thought about that in so long. I used to love those tattoos. I had everything from Spider-Man to Powerpuff Girls to Ed, Ed and Eddie to, again, cool stuff. Just a great time to grow up. The 90s were incredible. They really were. The 90s, I think, were the best era for kids to grow up, and the 80s were the best era for, like, music and stuff. That's neither here nor there, though. Attack of the Tattoo is a really good story. The tattoo itself actually has some weird abilities to it, and I don't want to spoil anything else for you. The story, again, is like 15 pages long. Pretty much all of them are. But that was a fantastic standout story. I can't believe that wasn't turned into like a full-fledged Goosebumps book. That would have been really cool. But anyway, the next story is called The Wish. Basically, a boy has a lot of trouble with his older brother who's very mean to him. And on Halloween night, he encounters an old lady who basically gives him a rock. And he makes pretty much a wish that involves his brother. And that story's pretty good too. I didn't love it, but it's pretty good. I enjoyed it. The next story is an old story. Now, if you ever have saw the Bride of the Living Dummy VHS tape, then you know about this episode. This was actually tacked on since Bride of the Living Dummy on the VHS tape that I have downstairs. I don't have it up here right now. Since that VHS tape had, it was like that particular episode, Bride of the Living Dummy, is only about 20 minutes long, so they tacked on another 20-minute long episode with it, and that was an old story. Very good story. Basically, two boys, and this is the only one I don't think had to do anything with Halloween, as far as I knew. But it was still really good. I've always enjoyed the story. I always enjoyed the episode when I was growing up. The two boys are basically just kind of hanging out, you know, and then all of a sudden an old lady that shows up at the door named Aunt Dahlia, apparently she's their aunt, she shows up and she starts doing all this cooking and stuff. Apparently their parents hadn't warned them that Aunt Dahlia was coming through, and she has an obsession with prunes, right, like the little fruit thing. And everything she makes, if it's cookies, if it's, you know, some kind of food, like a dinner type thing, it has prunes involved with it. And the kids start noticing that they themselves start turning old, right? Like they start getting wrinkles, their hair is falling out. The story itself, I don't remember. Okay, so I don't remember a whole lot about the actual episode, but I loved it. I remember absolutely adoring it, absolutely being shocked that nobody talked about that and that there was no Goosebumps book based on that. Well, that's because it was a short story in this book. I love an old story, but I think I like the TV episode better, but I love the short story as well. I thought it was really cool. The next story is The Scarecrow. I actually really love this one. Basically, a bunch of kids happen to notice that an old house that's in the neighborhood that an old man used to live in, I don't know if he moved or he died, I think it was something like that. There's a scarecrow that pops up in the yard, and it has these really expensive items of clothing on it. Gloves, a scarf, and I think a hat is what happened in the story. And the kids don't know who put it up. You know, there's 3 kids in this story. But all of these items, the scarf, the hat, and the gloves, are all something that they each wanted. And they start to notice because some of the pieces go missing. The main character notices this. So for example, one of the friends ends up having the scarf, and she wears it all the time, and her throat starts kind of acting dry. She starts losing her voice, and nobody really knows why. And then it just kind of progresses about these items and what they cause. I love that short story. I thought it was really cool. I thought it was a fun, kind of creepy story, honestly. It was pretty neat for a Goosebumps story. The next story is Awesome Aunts. I really enjoyed this one as well, and it's not aunts as in Aunt Dahlia, like your aunt, your father, or your mother's, you know, sister. It wasn't something like that. It was actually Ants, the bug. And this story is pretty cool. Basically, 2 kids are hanging out, and the one kid gets an order in the mail that ends up being kind of like from an Awesome Ants company, essentially, where it's like just an ant farm. And this turns out to be a situation where it's this huge package, and they basically put a letter inside saying, we want you to test this huge jumbo ant farm that we've made. And it turns into a really wild and wacky story too. It's not my favorite of the book, but I thought it was pretty good. It was pretty solid, a pretty fun story. It gets pretty out of hand too, by the way. The next story was Please Don't Feed the Bears. This is a pretty good one too. Basically 2 kids and their parents are going out to kind of an amusement park, theme park type thing. And the one kid, our main character, loves scary stuff. She's the older sister, and the younger sister is a baby, like 5 years old, basically. And they want to kind of keep the little younger girl going to kind of just the more fun area, you know. And the older kid just kind of wants to go ride the roller coasters that are meant for the bigger kids in this fun, happy-go-lucky, bear-themed theme park. And she encounters some of the people dressed up like bears, and they're really weird people. This story was wild too. I liked it a lot. The next story is The Goblin's Glare. This is one of the highlights of the book in my opinion. Not my favorite, once again. I'll tell you my favorite at the end of the video. But The Goblin's Glare was fantastic. Basically, there's a kid who loves to do art. And he essentially draws a picture of a goblin. He actually adjusts the eyes and stuff on the picture to make them scarier. Just because he wants to scare people. And he hangs it up on the front door of his house. And then he starts having these encounters, right? He and his friend, where they think they see the goblin itself as a real creature hiding in the bushes and stuff trying to attack them. And that story, I know a lot of people probably won't love it if they read it, if they can get their hands on a copy of this book, because this book is one of the harder ones that are hard to find. I was very blessed to find these tales from Tales to Give You Goosebumps books. That particular story I like a lot. I think it's really fun. I think it's kind of creepy, honestly, of this idea of a drawing possibly coming to life that was just meant to be a Halloween decoration. And I like it. I think it's pretty good. I know a lot of people probably won't love it, but I do. I don't know if I love it, but I like it a lot. The next story is Bats About Bats. This one I would say is like the next to last, not being the greatest in the book, right? But it's not bad by any means. Basically, two girls meet another girl after they encounter a bat that's flying around in the sky and in the air and stuff outside. And they become pretty good friends with this girl. I think her name is Dory or something. And they end up hanging out with her, and the girl has an obsession with bats. Her parents are actually bat scientists, whatever that's supposed to mean. I guess they're just focused on bats all the time, apparently. But they end up befriending this girl, and they're kind of weirded out by the fact that she's always defending the idea of bats not being scary. And the two main girls are absolutely terrified of bats in general. So they always have this disagreement, this little debate amongst themselves. And again, most of these stories in this book, a lot of the time, take place before Halloween and kind of leading up to Halloween, and sometimes on Halloween. This is one of the ones that kind of take place leading up to Halloween. And it was okay. I thought it was a pretty good story. I liked it. The next story, and the final story of the book, is called The Space Suit Snatcher. This is not my favorite of the book. I would actually say this is my least favorite of the entire collection, but it does not mean it's bad. It means that it's just not as great as the other stories pretty much are. This one involves a kid who loves yard sales, right? And this person's obsessed with radios and trying to build a radio that'll actually shoot messages out into space to space aliens if she can. And she has this big obsession with it. She's trying her best to try to build the machine to make it as strong as possible to send out the signal of messages. And a man hears her talking about the different parts that she finds in the stacks of junk at this yard sale. And he gives her a spacesuit. And he claims that if you put on the spacesuit, because he apparently did all the same things she did back in the day about trying to contact aliens and run a little radio show to shoot messages up in the sky with a radio and all that, he tells her that the space aliens came down, gave him this spacesuit, and told him if he ever puts it on, that they will come get him, right? Like, pick him up, bring him into space and all that, into their spaceship and all those things. And no one really knows if this is true or not. She starts having all these weird encounters, right, since she brought the suit home. And it's a fine story. I don't love it. I don't really adore it. I think the ending is a little odd. But it feels very Goosebumpsy. So if you like Goosebumps, you'll probably like the story as well. Again, this is one of the stories that feel to me a little bit more aimed towards younger kids, whereas something like the Scarecrow or something like Attack of the Tattoo, or even Pumpkin Juice for that matter, seem like they're addressed kind of in that middle grade area, more so, where they're like for people who can also be adults and read the stories and have a really good time. But anyway, when it comes to my personal favorite story in the book, it's kind of like a tie, right, between Attack of the Tattoo and the Scarecrow. I really love both of those stories, and Pumpkin Juice was pretty good too. Like I said, this book was filled with some really, really good tales. Again, compared to the other three books that I've read and reviewed here on the channel so far, I think up until now, the first book, Tales to Give You Goosebumps, was probably my favorite, and this just knocked all of them out of the water, in my opinion. As good as those other three books can be at times, this was a fantastic read, one of the best. Again, it's not going to get like this perfect, amazing score or anything for me on my rating scale, but it's really solid. I recommend the book if you can manage to get your hands on it in some way, shape, or form. I highly recommend Still More Tales to give, Still More Tales to Give You Goosebumps. I wanted to make sure I got the title right. R.L. Stine did a very good job again. And these being short stories, the main characters and stuff aren't really the most developed, and I don't really care because that's typically the case with Goosebumps. It's not really meant to be the most developed characters ever. But it's still fun. I had a really good time reading this book. Again, I've been reading it kind of off and on for about 3 or 4 days now, and had a blast, man. It was just really good. 10 short stories that were really, really fun. If I had to rate Still More Tales Still More Tales to Give You Goosebumps, excuse me, I almost forgot the rest of the title. If I had to rate this on a 5-star basis, I would probably give the book a high 4 out of 5 stars. And like I said, some of the stories kind of get a little lower in quality compared to the rest of the book. That's the only reason it's not getting a 5 out of 5, but honestly, this is really close to a 5 out of 5 story. This is a really good book. I enjoyed this a lot. I recommend it highly if you can get your hands on it. I'm really thankful I got a copy that was in really good condition. But anyway, what are your thoughts on the Tales to Give You Goosebumps books? What are your thoughts on Goosebumps in general? What are your thoughts on Still More Tales to Give You Goosebumps as a book itself, this collection here? What are your thoughts on my review? Put all your thoughts and comments down in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear what you have to say, guys. Thank you for watching. May the Lord Jesus Christ bless you guys today, and goodbye.